Hello, good evening, and welcome to our webinar this evening. We're really excited for you to join us this evening to talk a bit about making the most of USA College Day, and also to give you some information about studying in the United States as an undergraduate degree. So we'll be covering some of the information about how to choose a US university, how to go about the process of funding US study, and how do you go about the process of applying for studying. So we'll be taking questions at the end, so please feel free to use the Q&A box to ask any questions, and I'll come to those at the end. My name is Rowena. I'm one of the Education USA advisors at the Fulbright Commission, and here to answer questions about studying in the USA. My experience of studying in the USA was one of the most impactful things that I've done with my life, and it is such a pleasure to be able to help other people go and have similar experiences as well. Okay, so if you're wondering a little bit about who are we, what are we all about, Education USA is based at the Fulbright Commission here in London, and we provide advice and information about studying in the United States to anyone who lives in the United Kingdom. And our specialism is helping people from the UK apply to US universities. So we are here, we understand, and we're very happy to help translate sometimes the weird and wonderful world of US universities into how we can break the process down living in the UK. Fulbright is a not-for-profit organisation, partly funded by the US government and the UK government to promote peace and cultural understanding through educational exchange. And the Education USA Network is a global network of advisors in different countries whose job it is to give out free, unbiased information to help people achieve their dreams of studying in the United States. And we've been organising USA College Day for nearly the last 50 years here in the UK. We're really excited to welcome you to this week's College Day and to hopefully help connect you up with US universities and to learn more about this process. Okay, so why would someone go ahead and study in the US? We've got some great universities here in the UK, so why might you go and study in the US? And these are some of the reasons that UK students talk about when they're thinking about going to study in the US. So US universities have these great reputations, very well known for different aspects of academic study and research. So that can be a really powerful pull for UK students who are looking at studying in the US. There are more than 4,500 universities in the US. There's a real variety of institutions as well. It's about 120 here in the UK. And within that 4,500 institutions, there's a huge range of personality and style. So there's a huge amount to choose from. So when you're looking at universities in the US, we'd always advise that you focus on this idea of finding your fit, finding a university that's going to be a great fit for you. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Another reason that UK students often are looking at the US to go and study for an undergraduate degree is the opportunity to experience a really vibrant campus life and to take part in lots of activities. So US universities are often really well known for their school spirit, the way that students get involved in campus life, and also the opportunities on campus, whether that's undergraduate research, whether that's sports, clubs, societies, opportunities to take the learning you've done in the classroom and put it into practice. The US university kind of experience is as much about what you're doing out of the classroom as what you're doing inside of it. So that means that there's a huge amount of variety of clubs and societies for students to join, whether it's just play sport, from anything from what we would call football, they would call soccer, to rugby, to ultimate frisbee, and all sorts of sports that you might not know about. Things like outdoor clubs can be really popular. So you want to learn how to ski or go kayaking, these can be opportunities as well. Huge amounts of variety of music, music rooms, music instruments, orchestras, a cappella groups, all sorts of things going on. Dance, anything from Bollywood dance right the way through to ballet, and all sorts of kind of almost like professional level sports being played. So everybody going to the game, perhaps the American football game, and supporting their school's team as they're playing. There's huge amounts of student activities going on, whichever university you're looking at, but each university has its own slightly different personality when it comes to these activities. Another big reason that UK students are often really excited about US universities is this idea of academic flexibility. So where in the UK we tend to choose our high school subjects, perhaps our GCSEs or our Nat5s, and then perhaps our advanced hires or our A levels or our BTECs, and we're kind of constantly narrowing our curriculum. In the US, that narrowing doesn't really happen, and it's the same when it comes to universities. So unlike here in the UK, where you might just pick one course to study for 3 years, in the US, US universities employ this idea of the liberal arts and sciences curriculum. And what that means is that it's about a well-rounded education. So American students don't have to know what they want to study when they go to university. They don't have to apply for a specific course. And in fact, most students stay undecided for the first 2 years of the 4-year degree. And then it's somewhere around the end of the second year, they choose what's called their major, which is their area of specialization. Maybe they might have 2 majors, maybe they might have a major and a minor, but it gives that ability to be flexible, to perhaps pair subjects together that you might not have studied before, and to learn more about the information and the ideas that interest you. So you might be taking a creative writing class at one minute, and then perhaps you're in a business studies class at the next moment. So there's a real emphasis on that teaching and that flexibility, and then putting that knowledge into practice far more than you might see at a UK university. Another reason that UK students are often looking at US universities is the funding opportunities. And that might be really surprising to some, but it's another top reason for studying in the US. So we'll be talking a bit about this more later on, but there are opportunities to find a variety of scholarships in the US. And it's quite different to the kind of loan-based system that we have here in the UK. Another reason is to think about employability. The opportunity to internationalize your CV. Studying abroad can be really appealing to employers. It means that you're someone who's perhaps gone and done something different. You've got different interpersonal skills, experience in cross-cultural communication. You can rub along with people whose backgrounds are different to your own. So that can be a really interesting part of kind of securing jobs after university, and that ability to be in an international degree in an international setting can set you really well up for the kind of job market later on. Thinking about networks, confidence, and so on. And then finally, it's an opportunity to learn about a new culture. So the US spans 6 time zones. It is a completely huge country and has a lot of different geographies and cultures within it. So having those opportunities to immerse yourself in a different country, to think about what's the same and what's different as at home, and to perhaps have experiences that you might not have here in the UK can also be a really great way and a really big reason why UK students are keen to go to the US. Okay, so there are a few differences, however, when we're talking about US universities and comparing them to UK universities. So the first thing is the duration. In the UK, a standard undergraduate degree is 3 years long. In the United States, a standard undergraduate degree is 4 years long. And students are coming out with the same qualification at the end of it, either a Bachelor of Science or a Bachelor of Arts. So it's just a longer degree, and that's partly because of that academic flexibility that's built into it. Another reason why US universities are a little bit different is you would be applying to the university as a whole, not a particular department. So where in the UK you might be applying to read chemistry, and your application will be looked at by the chemistry department to decide if you get a place on the chemistry course. In the US, you're applying generally into the university. You don't know yet what you're going to study. So it does change the way that you're applying and the kind of information that you're giving the university, because the university wants to know more about what you're going to be like as a student at the university as a whole, rather than just as a potential chemistry student, for example. In the US, unlike here in the UK, where we have UCAS, and we have a kind of understood timeline and a government that sets the tuition fees for UK universities. In the US, there are no set fees or deadlines. So each university can set its own fees, they can create their own deadlines, they can create their own application processes and even their own application forms. So each university can do something a little bit different if they want to. Another thing that is quite different to how we think about university in the UK, and this is really important, is thinking about funding university study from the start of the process rather than waiting until you've got admitted and then thinking about it at the end. This is a really common trap that we see students applying to US universities falling into. What you want to be thinking about if the availability of funding, whether that's scholarships, need-based financial aid, or anything like that, if you need help with paying for the cost of college as an international student, you want to be putting that up at the beginning of your process. So we'll talk more about funding shortly, but you want to be thinking about that right from the get-go, rather than waiting until you've got admitted and then starting to think about it. It's got to be up at the beginning of that process. And then finally, I just want to flag there are a couple of exceptional subjects in the US that work quite differently to how we study these subjects in the UK. So in the US, there is no such thing as an undergraduate law program, and nor is there any such thing as an undergraduate medical program. Both of these programs in the US are postgraduate, graduate programs only. So a student would have to do an undergraduate degree first, 4 years in perhaps, I don't know, political science, if it was law, or maybe, I don't know, English or anthropology or whatever it happens to be, and then go into law. And maybe a student who's looking to go into medical school might do something like biology as an undergraduate degree. So just to flag that if medicine or law are the thing that you have your heart set on, you may well be better looking at the UK process. There are more routes into law for international students than there are for medicine. If clinical medicine is what you're interested in, the UK is always going to be a better fit as an international student. Perfect. Okay, I also wanted to share with you a quick timeline and a sense of what this process looks like. So we would always recommend starting by this research process. And actually, for many of the students I work with, I would be suggesting 90% research, 10% actually doing the applying. 90% research, 10% doing the applying. The students who just jump straight to applying for universities tend to not do particularly well in the admissions process, particularly if they're looking at selective universities. So I would be recommending anyone who's thinking about studying in the US and looking to apply for an undergraduate degree to be thinking about that research maybe 1.5 years out from studying. So for example, if somebody was thinking, if somebody was in year 12 right now, that's a great time to be researching US universities with the aim that next year you would be making those applications to start the following year, perhaps after your A-levels or your advanced hires. So about a year and a half out, that's where you want to be doing some really good research about US universities and really getting a handle on the lay of the land. It's about the same time where you might want to be thinking for any required exams, admissions exams, and aiming to take this perhaps in the summer after year 12 if you're in England and Wales, or the summer of summer of year 6 if you're in Scotland, or year 13 in Northern Ireland. So thinking about taking those exams, you can take those before you take perhaps A-levels or the IB or whatever, and getting those under your belt while you're doing those research. And that's if you need to take them. We'll talk more about those later on. And then as you go into the autumn of the year before you plan to apply, so if you were going into year 13 now, and we're planning to apply to start a degree next summer, this is the point where you'd want to be starting to finalize a selection of 6 to 10 schools where you think that you would be a really good fit, where you're going to make applications to, and you would have really well researched them along the way. Put the applications together in that autumn and submit those, and then look to wait to receive admissions decisions. And that can be across the winter and spring of that year. Okay, let's imagine you're admitted. Yay, how exciting. That's when you've moved towards the process of applying for an American student visa in the spring, summer before you were due to start your degree. And then thinking about kind of getting ready to go pre-departure, preparing to leave, and then perhaps starting your studies next August or next September if you were in year 13 this year. So hopefully that's a sense of the kind of timeline of this process. But my strong recommendation is to make sure that you're researching universities. And the great news is USA College Day can be a really helpful part of that research. Talking to the different universities, learning more about them, learning more about what they're looking for can be really powerful. Okay, so we've talked about choosing universities. We've been talking about researching universities, and it's a really important step in the process of applying to US universities. It's important to think through it, and the key thing here is to be flexible with the choices. Again, there are 4,500 universities in the US, and it's a daunting process to think about how you go about researching those universities and then narrowing universities down that are going to be a really good fit for you. But just be aware that going into this process, you're unlikely to have heard of all of those 4,000 universities. So it's a really important part to know that you're going to be learning more about each of the universities. And in the same way that if you talk to an American on the street, perhaps you ask them if they heard any UK universities, and they say, sure, I've heard of Oxford and Cambridge and Oxbridge. Those are the 3 universities I've heard of so far. So just being really aware that in the same way that that American person might be missing the Imperials and the Edinburghs and the Birminghams and the Exeters and the Southamptons and the Durhams and the Queen's, Belfast. All these universities are amazing universities, but the American might not have heard of them. Just like that, we need to be very aware that we often haven't heard of lots of universities as well in the US. And that doesn't make them bad, it just means we haven't heard of them yet. Okay, so a really important part of this process is determining what we're going to call here your sense of fit. This is the first step in the choosing process, understanding what factors are important to you, and then helping that use your helping your sense of fit guide your sense of what is on your list. So we're going to focus a lot on this term fit and thinking about what school and what program might be the best fit for you and your personal and academic interests. So there's lots of factors to think about both inside and outside the program, outside of the classroom. So you might be thinking about what type of program and what kind of department. For example, if you're interested in engineering, a school that doesn't offer an engineering program is unlikely to be a good fit for you. You might be thinking about location. You might be thinking about availability of funding. Perhaps if you need funding to make your US study dream happen, you're going to want to be thinking about a university that's a good fit for you that can meet your financial needs. You might be thinking about campus size. Do you want to be at a very large university where there's maybe 55, 60,000 students on campus? Perhaps lots going on, but maybe easy to feel a little bit anonymous? Or do you want to be at a super small liberal arts college, for example? Maybe you're only one of 500, 600 students on campus, but it means that you get lots of attention from the professors and lots of opportunities that you're not having to fight lots of other people for. Maybe you're thinking about the kind of environment, the academic environment you want to be in. Do you want to be in a kind of rigorous, competitive environment? Or maybe you're looking for something which is more inclusive and collaborative with other students. All of these things can be found in the US system. So you want to be thinking about what factors are important to you. And then you want to start to prioritize universities that meet those factors. So if you don't like the cold and snow, maybe the East Coast isn't the best fit for you. And maybe if you're thinking about the kind of money factor and funding, you're going to find that if you want to study in the middle of Manhattan, it's going to be a lot more expensive than if you were to go to university in, say, a state like Michigan, which has a relatively low cost of living. And that's just the same as if you were to live in the middle of London versus the cost to study in, say, Lancaster, for example. The cost of living is likely to be different in those places. So thinking about all these things, thinking about your factors and the things that are interesting to you. So if you head onto our website, we've got a whole list of factors to have a think about, things to play around with. And as you're researching universities, asking yourself, hey, cool, I'm really digging this particular university. Why is it speaking to me? And can I find that same thing that's speaking to me at other universities as well? Okay, so once you've started that broad research piece, what you want to do is start to think about what factors are important to you. So you've got those factors. You want to start using that information to begin researching universities. So unlike UCAS, in the US system, you're not limited to 5 universities. And in theory, you could apply to as many as you'd like. However, I would strongly recommend applying, 50 universities is probably a terrible idea because there'll be 50 not particularly good applications. So we would recommend thinking about maybe 6 to 10 universities that are a really good fit, meet your factors, that are really interesting to you and genuinely excite you, and to use those kind of 6 to 10 as the universities you're applying to. So you want to be thinking about how you go about doing this. Okay, so you can find lots of resources on our website in the choosing section of our undergraduate guide, including links to special search engines for US universities, where you can put in your different factors that you're interested in, and then it will help streamline that 4,000 universities down to a group of universities that perhaps meet your criteria. So maybe you are interested in engineering. Great, you put that in. It would show you schools with programs of engineering. Maybe you know that you want to be in the state of Texas. Amazing, pop that in, and it will then show you schools in Texas that also have just engineering programs. There's even some search engines that include the ability to ask about, do schools offer need-based aid, financial aid, or scholarships? Amazing. And are they available to international students? So they can really help you narrow down your options along the way. Okay, once you've started to identify some universities, what you want to be thinking about is researching them further on the university website and also get in touch with them directly. Unlike the UK process, where it's very much kind of keeping the university perhaps a little more at arm's length, in the US process, and particularly at highly selective universities, engaging with the admissions office, building a relationship with them can be really helpful in this process. So what I would be suggesting is you want to be thinking about building up all sorts of information about a university. Personally, if it were me, I would keep a spreadsheet of the different universities I was looking at, and I'd keep notes on perhaps what was attractive to me about those universities. What was speaking to me? Were there any particular programs or research units or clubs that were particularly exciting to me? Was there anything I didn't like about the university? Perhaps I'd keep a record of any particular scholarships that stood out to me or something like that. And I'd start to build up my research and start to look more deeply into different universities. You want to be thinking about where to find the information. The best place to find up-to-date information is always going to be on a university's website. And if you have a look on the university's website, they will have a profile of the average admitted applicant, which you can use to see perhaps how academically competitive a university is, where perhaps students come from in the world. Maybe you're looking at a university that has lots of international students. Maybe you know that you're going to be interesting and different as an international student because mainly it's domestic students at that university. You'll find lots more information about the majors and the programs of study. You'll find virtual campus tours, information about student life, sports, student housing, financial aid, and so on, all on the website. And you'll see also that often they have resources for international students as well. So specific pages and information tailored for international students. You'll find also that universities are often offering webinars and all sorts of information about their university and what it's like to study there. They might bring on current students. You might also find that following a university's social media accounts can be a really good way to get a feel for life at the university and the kind of personality of that university. So just really encouraging you to have a think about it. Now, what I would say is you want to be thinking carefully about the types of universities that you're going to apply to. There are many universities that have huge numbers of applications. So with these, we would call them ultra competitive universities. They're schools like, I know, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, UCLA, places like this, where you will find that universities will have many thousands upon thousands upon thousands of applications from highly qualified students across the board. So my recommendation, if you're looking at those schools are a stretch for anyone to get admitted to. There is no slam dunk admission at those schools. So just really encouraging you to cast a wide net, to start to dig a little bit deeper. So maybe you might have heard of Harvard. Have you heard of Rice University? Rice University is in Houston, Texas. Some people call it the Harvard of the South. It's an amazing research university. It is huge links with NASA and space research, but all sorts of other academic disciplines as well. And if you haven't heard of Rice, it's worth having a look at if you're looking at a school like Harvard. And it can really affect your competitiveness by opening up, thinking broadly. The many British students apply to schools like NYU or Columbia, and you can affect your competitiveness by reaching out beyond perhaps universities that we've often heard of over here in the UK. Okay. So, funding. Funding is an area we get many questions about. Lots of people are often asking us questions about this. So we're going to think about some of the areas of funding that you can pull from, and also some strategies to implement finding funding to help make US study happen. So funding is a challenge for both US domestic students and also international students. And it's something that if this is something you have to think about in your journey to US study, it's really important to be prioritizing it up at the beginning of a journey and to keep it in mind all the time. I often work with students and say, follow the money, find the money and follow it through. Okay, so sources of funding for US study. So where does money come to fund US study? So the first area of funding that US universities expect students to be thinking about is personal or family funds. So US universities will expect families to prioritize students' education and invest in that education. It's seen as a real opportunity and it's a very kind of American perspective. So thinking about what personal funds or family funds are available to help fund study in the USA. And then another area to have a think about is US universities themselves. And this is one of the areas that I see British students being most successful at gaining external funding from their family or personal funds. So being aware of that, and we're going to break that down a little bit in a minute, but just know that this is a really important area. And there are two types, need-based aid and merit-based scholarships, and we'll explain about those in a minute. Funding at US universities is going to vary a lot between different universities. So if financial aid is important, you want to be looking for and only applying to universities offering financial aid for international students. Again, lots of students will ring me up and say, Rowena, I want to study at UCLA. And I say, great, but you're also saying you need a scholarship. And unfortunately, UCLA doesn't have any scholarships for international students. So if it's only about UCLA, that's not going to happen. But what is it about UCLA? Is there something about being in that area of California? In which case, let's make some suggestions of universities that do have funding. Or is it something about a particular discipline or major or something like that? In which case, I'm pretty sure I could find some universities across the United States that might offer that, plus also offer that funding. So being really clear in your research process, does this university have funding available? Another area that we often see students looking at is external funding bodies. These can be all sorts of different organizations, and we'll talk about them in a moment. And then finally, loans. So I would always recommend loans are your final resort. Unfortunately, you can't take the UK student loan with you to the United States. It would be amazing if you could, but unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. The UK student loan is only for UK universities. And so you might start to then look at US-based student loans. US student loans require you normally to have a US citizenship or permanent residency, or have a US citizen or permanent resident willing to co-sign the loan with you. I would just recommend, if you're looking down this route, normally I say to students in this position, is there a better university which might have the funding in place? Because I think taking out loans can be a really tricky process, particularly at this point. So that's my advice on loans. We can talk a little bit more about that if people have got questions. So it might be that you're pulling from these different sources in differing amounts. So it may be that you're putting some personal family funds towards studying in the US. Perhaps you're looking at some funding from a US university, and maybe there's an external funding body that puts in some money as well. And maybe between the combination of them, you get a pot that can cover the costs of your education. Okay, we talked about this idea of university funding. What is it? How does it work? And how do we go about thinking about this? So the thing about university funding from US universities is, in general, this funding is really, really helpful because it doesn't need to be paid back. So even unlike the UK student loan, funding from US universities doesn't have to be paid back. It's often in the form of a grant, so free money, that is gift money. And it can be a really powerful way of helping bridge the gap between what you have available and what you would need to attend. Okay, so these two types of university funding I want to talk about tonight. The first is this idea of need-based financial aid. So how does this work? So what you'll find on every university website is something called the cost to attend. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at the cost to attend, that you are comparing it like for like with the UK. So the cost to attend includes the tuition fees for the US university, but it also includes how much it would be to perhaps live in a dorm room on campus, to have a meal plan. It'll have an estimation for books and other expenses. Sometimes it has an estimation for personal expenses. That's, having fun money, coffees, all of that kind of stuff. It may even have an estimation for travel in it. So universities roll all these costs up and call that the cost to attend. And that's per year. And that's where you'll see differences in different parts of the United States, where perhaps living costs are different. So that's per year, and so you times that for 4 years at a US university. And the way that need-based financial aid works is that the university will look at the cost to attend, and if a student is applying for need-based aid, they will submit additional forms when they apply. And those forms will show a financial picture of the student and their family. So it would cover things like if the student has a job and any savings, it would cover parental income, it would cover parental assets, perhaps even the outgoings of the family. A whole kind of complete financial picture of that family. And what the university will then do is, based on that information, come up with a fair sense of what that family could afford to go towards the cost to attend. And if this university offers need-based financial aid and they want to admit the student, then what they would do is look at the cost to attend, what the family could contribute, and then they would make up the remainder with this gift money. Not all universities offer need-based financial aid, but it's definitely something to have a look at. And many universities will offer need-based financial aid for the whole cost of attendance. So if your family has nothing, absolutely nothing, then in theory, they could make 100% of the cost to attend that university. That's both living costs and tuition costs in grant or gift money as need-based financial aid. It is a quite different process to how we think about things here in the UK. Okay, and the other form of money is what's called a merit-based scholarship. So merit-based scholarships are based on merit, so based on being good at something, based on being the best at something. So you might have merit-based scholarships because perhaps you're one of the strongest students applying to that university, and that'll be based on perhaps your GCSE and your A-level and BTEC grades, or maybe it's based on the fact that you have particular skills in music or drama. Maybe it's a merit-based scholarship because of particular talents you have in sport, in which case that would be called a sports scholarship. Or maybe it's because you're really active in your local community and do a lot of what we would call volunteering or Americans would call service, maybe there's a scholarship that kind of rewards or is focused around that particular area. So it's just a really, something to bear in mind. What you will find is that some merit-based scholarships can come in different amounts, right? So you might find a university has a $10,000 merit-based scholarship. Amazing, fantastic. But if the cost to attend is still $60,000 per year, it's definitely a help, but there's still quite a big section there. And if your family need that funding, then it's still got to look a little deeper there. Maybe there's some merit-based scholarships that cover the whole cost of attending. Perhaps there's a merit-based scholarship that covers the cost of tuition. So then it's just then simply looking at the living costs for that university. Merit-based scholarships are incredibly flexible. Lots of universities offer them in varying different amounts. So it's a really helpful way to kind of have a good think about what you might be looking for. The key thing about merit-based scholarships, it isn't based on financial needs. So it isn't looking at how much money you or your family have. It's about the talents or the how much your application stands out in an application pool. Okay. So there's lots of information on our website, and we break that down, this whole concept and process, in huge amounts of detail on our website. We've also got all sorts of tools that you can use as you're looking at different university funding to help have a sense and an idea of how these different forms of funding stack up. And it's definitely something you'd be asking US universities at College Day about. Okay, external funding bodies, and these can cover a wide range of professional, charity, government organizations that are external to the university. So they can be thought as perhaps niche scholarships, as they might have a particular specific criteria based on the mission of the funding body. So it could be that an external funding body has a particular has a scholarship for people from a particular country of origin, ethnicity, religious faith, interest in a particular field, gender, talents, anything like that. So for example, there might be a scholarship for women engineers, for example. So what you want to do is have a look at external funding bodies. We've got a whole list of them on our website. So you can use some of the search engines on our website to find those. But another example, you might find that there's even external funding bodies linked to universities. So for example, at one of the top public universities in the United States, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, there is an external funding body called the Morehead Cain Scholarship. It's separate to the university, but its sole purpose is to fund the full cost of tuition and living costs for a group of students going to UNC Chapel Hill. And the great news about the Morehead Cain Scholarship is it is open to UK students. So Morehead Cain is looking for things like leadership, evidence of your character, things like your scholarship, and also things like physical vigor. And it funds a 4-year fully funded educational experience for students of the highest caliber at UNC Chapel Hill. So that's just an example of a very generous external funding body. You might find that there are funding bodies that are willing to give out $1,000 scholarships. Maybe it's not going to cover the whole cost to attend, but perhaps it's a really helpful boost towards covering things like flights or something like that. Okay, so I just wanted to put out here, if funding is something that you're having to think about in this journey, I just want to put to you that there is some strategy that you can be thinking about. The first is thinking about cost of living. As I said, living in the middle of Manhattan or any other big city is likely to be a whole lot more expensive than living in a lower cost area. You might also be thinking about tuition. So different universities have different levels of tuition. And so you might find that actually looking at state universities might have a lower level of tuition than perhaps a private university, where tuition fees may be a whole lot higher, and that increases the cost to attend. Or you might be thinking about the funding aspect. So different universities are going to have different funding available. So you might find that a state university has lower tuition, but do they have as many funding opportunities available to you? It's kind of thinking through those different aspects and thinking about, when you're thinking about funding, thinking about how you balance these three things together. But my key point here is always making sure you're thinking about the funding right from the beginning. There's no point in getting all excited, doing a huge amount of work on applying to a university, getting admitted if they don't have the funding, if they can't afford to make your dream happen. So having a good old think about these kind of pillars of strategy, and kind of moving between them to help you find the funding if that's something that you need. Okay, great. I also want to just quickly touch on this idea of community college. It's a very American thing that is quite different to anything we have in the UK. And this is often called the 2+2 model. And how community colleges in the US work is these are institutions that run 2-year degrees. They're called associate's degrees. And they allow students to come in. They're very flexible with entry requirements. And they allow students to build up a really strong GPA, the way they measure academic progress, a really strong GPA, and cover off a lot of the kind of requirements that students might need to build up. They are also a lot cheaper to attend than perhaps a 4-year university. So when a student graduates from a community college, they come out with an associate's degree. It takes 2 years to achieve. But one of the great things about community colleges is the links that they then have with 4-year institutions. So you can graduate from a community college and go into then straight into year 3 of a 4-year university. And then just do simply 2 years at that university in order to graduate with not only your associate's degree, but then also your bachelor's degree as well. So many American students will use a community college in order to offset some of those costs. And for example, I've just popped here LA Valley College, which is a community college in Los Angeles. And you can see the links which they have. So students transfer from LAVC over to places like UCLA, or USC or Cal Poly. So it can be a really powerful way to build the skills, get used to the American education mode, but also to achieve that funding and to make US universities a really achievable approach. So they're much less expensive and definitely worth having a look at. And it's great at USA College OA, we have the Seattle colleges in Washington who are attending. They are a community college. They will be super happy to talk about, how their programs work and the kind of benefits of being able to transfer into 4-year universities to achieve that degree. Okay, so moving into the next section, which is just about completing an application. This process is quite different to applying through UCAS to a UK university. So what are the US universities looking for? The first thing they want to know is about your academic achievement measured by your results. So GCSEs, A-levels, BTECs, could also be the IB, could be Nat5s and highers. Whatever it is that you're studying, a US university knows that that's what we study here in the UK, and they will be looking to measure your academics using what you've been studying up until now. So they want to know, are you a suitable candidate for their university? How have you done in those exams? And what kinds of subjects have you chosen to pursue? Okay. The next area they might be looking for is this idea of academic fit. Have you got genuinely excited about the programs at their university? Have you thought about perhaps kind of majors that you might be interested in? Have you thought about their style of teaching? Maybe you are someone who's identified that their small classes at a small liberal arts college is a really good fit for your learning style. Or maybe you're particularly interested in looking at a particular set of lab work or undergraduate research or something like that, and then you've identified that the university you're applying to is a good fit for that. So you want to be thinking about that piece. So it's about your academic progress to date, your academic grades to date, but it's also about your academic fit for the particular institution. Why are you wanting to go to their university? It's really important. US universities want to know, of all those 4,000 universities, why have you chosen their particular institution to apply to? And it's demonstrating that sense of fit, demonstrating why that is a university you're interested in becomes really important in the application. Okay, you want to be in New York, but why are you applying to NYU over, say, Columbia? Or why are you not looking at the somewhere like the State University of New York system? It's really important that you're able to articulate that in this process. Another thing US universities would be looking at is extracurriculars, and this is quite different to how UK universities think. So in the US, extracurriculars tend to have a big focus in the application process. So what they want to do is understand when your time is your own, when you have free time, what do you choose to do with that time? And that's measured by your extracurriculars. So it's what you're doing, perhaps inside school, perhaps clubs and societies and things you're doing, but it's also outside of school, whether that's part-time work, caring responsibilities, volunteering, sports, music, drama, whatever it happens to be that you're doing, and that they're interested in that. And then finally, we've called it here personal attributes. It's just being aware that US universities want to know about your context and your story. So US universities want to know, where have you come from? Why do you see the world like you see the world? Perhaps you're somebody who has overcome lots of barriers in your life, and they want to know about that because it informs the person you are. US universities work on this idea of a holistic admissions process. So they're wanting to understand, who are you and what are you all about and what makes you tick? Because what they're doing is building up a class of lots of different people who are going to come onto their campus and really make the most of the opportunities available. So that's what they're looking for in the process and out of the application materials. Okay, so what actually do you need to complete? So for each university, it's going to be slightly different. Each university has its own application process and can make up its own specific requirements, but broadly, each university is going to ask for an application form, which will have biographical detail about you, as well as things like an extracurricular list, a list of the subjects that you're studying, and things like that. They're going to ask for you to write 2 to 3 essays. Some of those will be a personal essay that is from your own perspective. I've read some great essays along the way. I've read essays about people thinking about, their love of cooking. I've read essays about people thinking about, their part-time job and what they've learned from that. It's often quite an opportunity to show your perspective on the world. So it might be an essay about a part-time job, but it's not really an essay about a part-time job. It perhaps goes deeper than that. It perhaps shows how you see the world and how you're thinking about things. So they are quite different. We've got lots of examples on our website, lots of resources to have a think about that. But it is giving this admissions officer a window into your world. And then there might be some additional essays that allow you to show why you think that university would be a good fit for you and to show who you are a little bit more as well. You may need to also submit some admissions exam scores. Different universities will have different policies around this. Some universities require what's called the SAT or ACT. It doesn't matter which one you do, but these are American admissions exams. You can take them here in the UK, and they broadly test maths, verbal reasoning, grammar, things like data analysis, things like that. So they are quite different to how we study for things like GCSEs or Nat 5s. So do make sure you've had a look through those and prepared for that exam if you need to take them. A lot of universities are what's called test optional. You'll see this on their website, and that means that it's up to you as to whether you want to submit an admissions exam score. Many students choose to just submit their GCSEs and their A-levels and their Nat 5s and higher, or their IB score, because in many ways, all of those exams, UK school exams, are already kind of standardized exams that we all take here in the UK. And many universities say, well, if you've taken exams like that, we don't need admissions exam scores. So do have a look as to whether you actually need those exams if you're thinking about them. Okay, also in your application is likely to be 2 to 3 recommendation letters. And these recommendation letters are normally from teachers at your high school. So there'll be one letter that is from what's called a counsellor, which is perhaps someone like your form tutor, head of sixth form, perhaps a careers guidance person, someone like that who can talk about you in school, what you're like, what you're contributing to the community. And then maybe 2 more teachers who are actually teaching you, and they will talk about you as what you are like in A-level history lessons. What do you like to teach? Are you somebody who's curious, interested? Are you, pushing the boundaries on your learning? Are you grasping the subjects along the way? And so universities want to know, what are you like in the learning environment now? And they start to then use that to decide what you might be like in their university context. And then there's a couple of other documents, something called the transcript, which is really easy for us in the UK. Your teachers will put this together for you. But the transcript basically lists the qualifications you've taken up until the point you've applied. So, for example, if you are in Birmingham, that might mean that it's a list of your GCSEs, the different subjects, plus your grades. And then it would also be your A levels if you're studying A levels or BTEC. So maybe you're taking 2 A levels and a BTEC. It would list out the A levels and BTEC that you're doing, and then it would list out a predicted grade for each of those subjects. So it's a document that's made by your teachers that shows the different academic points of view. And then finally, there may well be an application fee. Each university can, and many do, ask for an application fee. If the application fee would cause any kind of financial hardship to you or your family, then often universities have a process where you can apply to have that application fee waived. So do look out for that on university websites. So what I would say is each university can, and many do, their own systems of applications, but I will just flag that you might find that many universities use something called the Common Application. The Common Application, or Common App as it's often called, it allows you to not have to refill out that application form every single time, and allows you to submit one main essay to each university, but you still have to apply to each university individually, even if you're using the Common App. But it does streamline some of the processes itself. Okay, right. Making the most of College Day. This is something that we get lots of questions for. We're so excited. I think it's the 48th College Day. So it's been going for 48 years. And as a veteran of College Day, I wanted to share some of my top tips for how to make the most of College Day. It's going to be a really busy event. We're expecting several thousand people over the course of 2 days. We're really excited to welcome you, and I know the universities are really excited as well. They love College Day because they know that they get to meet some really interesting, exciting students, and they have made their time to come and to meet with you and your families. So super excited about having you join us for College Day. Here are some of my top tips for having a think about how you can go through College Day. So my first tip here is to get prepared. Research some of the universities attending and have a plan. So that on our website, where you've registered for tickets, we've also got a copy of the program in digital format. We'll be giving it out on paper on the day, so you'll get a copy of the program at College Day. But in the meantime, you can use the digital version of that document to see which universities are there. And each university has provided a couple of paragraphs about their university and some of the key information. We've also included links to their websites, so you can have a look through those, start to perhaps follow them on social media, and learn a little bit more about them, maybe start making a short list of universities that you want to go and speak to. Making sure that you've got a plan. So maybe you're starting to identify certain universities, start to have a think about, are there particular schools that you'd like to see? Maybe you come up with a list of, I don't know, 5 or 10 universities you definitely want to see, and then you allow yourself some time to kind of wander around and perhaps visit some universities that you weren't planning on visiting, but kind of attract you on the day. Okay, so on the day when you arrive, be ready to show your Eventbrite ticket, which you've registered for, and make sure that you've got your StriveScan barcode. These will be being sent out over the next couple of days, and they will scan you into the event. And what I would just say is the Strive. We have a system called StriveScan. It means that everybody has their own individual barcode. And when you are talking to universities at College Day, you can offer your barcode to them and they can scan it, and then they can add you to their mailing list or perhaps reach out to you and follow up after the fair. So it's a really advantageous system that allows you to stay in control of your own data. So do make sure you've got your StriveScan barcode on your phone ready. I'd also be thinking about prepping some, what I'm going to call here, good questions. So some people come and they just wander around and they say, what is this? Is this a university? Or what's the minimum I need to get in? Something like that. I would just suggest those aren't such great questions. Great questions might be, hey, I've never heard of your university. I'd love to know a bit about what kind of student goes to your university. That's a great question because the admissions officer can kind of open up, perhaps tell you a bit more, and you can gather information that helps you decide if this university is a good fit for you. Maybe another question is to think about funding. Perhaps if you're looking for funding, maybe asking, what kind of availability of funding is available? Perhaps how competitive is that funding to gain? I definitely recommend bringing a notebook and a pen to keep track of the information and being kind of ready for that. Okay, when you're in the fair, we've got an Education USA advising zone. So we've got advisors there who are here to help. So my colleagues and I will be wandering around. If you're not quite sure how, you've got a question that's kind of general about US study, we are here to help and here to help point you in the right direction. There are going to be seminars going throughout the day to learn more. So you'll find a list. There are all sorts of topics from why study in the USA to creating an amazing application. And those are being delivered by universities throughout the day. So you can learn more about what it's like to be at a US university or how to tailor a great application. You can kind of dip in and out of those as you like. My other recommendation here is to visit the booths of at least 5 universities you've not previously considered. Students I see being successful in this process are students who are willing to be open-minded and flexible with their choices. So I just want to highlight that being open-minded about universities and finding more out about them will be a really helpful piece in this process. Okay, so speaking to reps, so I want to suggest to you to be strategic. So there are going to be admissions officers there who are going to be the people who read applications from UK students, and they make decisions about whether students get admitted or not. And some of them also have the authority to decide on scholarship and money to give away. So this is a really useful moment to start thinking about impressing admissions officers. You want to stand out in a good way at the fair, and so that perhaps a rep admissions officer scans your barcode and perhaps they just make a note to themselves, hey, that was a really great student. I'm really excited to have met them. And then they kind of follow up with you or you follow up with them and you can kind of build on that relationship. Especially if you're looking for funding, building those relationships can be really helpful in this process. Okay, I would also recommend 100% students lead the conversation with admissions reps. It's much more impactful than if mum and dad are kind of asking the questions. It shows if you're a student that you're much more interested in this. And sometimes I have admissions officers saying to me, hey, Rowena, like, I'm not looking to admit the parent, it's the student that I want to admit. So students, this is your opportunity to ask your questions. You won't get it wrong. You will be absolutely great. But make sure that you're kind of perhaps taking the lead, asking the first questions. And it's absolutely fine if then perhaps family have questions as well. Okay, make sure you're registering your interest by asking universities to scan your barcode. That allows the university to know you're interested in their university and is potentially going to build the building blocks for building up that admissions relationship along the way. And then also making sure that you follow up. So this is normally done by email. If you scanned your barcode, you may well get the admissions officer email you directly, or you can find their contact details perhaps on their stand or on the university's website, and just making sure that you follow up with a thank you email. Thank you so much for the time that you spent speaking to me. I really enjoyed our conversation, having reflected a bit further. I've got a couple more questions which I'd love to ask, and then you might ask those questions. It's a great way to kind of continue building up that relationship along the way, particularly if you're looking at selective or competitive universities. Okay, so those are my top tips for USA College Day. If you've got any questions, please feel free to jump into the chat, into the Q&A, and I'm happy to do a scoop through questions in a moment. Okay, other things I just wanted to highlight, ways that we can help at Education USA. So the first thing that I wanted to highlight was the Fulbright website. That's fulbright.org.uk. And I have put a big red arrow pointing to Education USA advice. So if you head onto our website from our homepage, jump into Education USA advice. We've got specific guides that break down all of the things in much more detail than I've been talking about tonight. So if you want to look at our guide to funding your studies in the USA, we've got a huge amount of information and resources to dig into and to learn more about that process. If you want to learn about the ins and outs of applying for an undergraduate degree, we've got a whole guide for you for that. So please do take a look at our website and the guides that we've produced, purposely for UK students looking to apply to US universities. Another thing that I want to just flag is the Sutton Trust US program. This is a program we run here at Fulbright. It's for high achieving Year 12 students from low income families. It is a program only open to Year 12 students, and that is S5 in Scotland or Year 13 in Northern Ireland. And it takes a group of students each year into a program learning more about US universities. We actually visit the United States and learn more about universities there, and then we will support students in the program to apply for undergraduate study in the USA and gain financial aid that will help them. And the program is completely free for the students who are selected onto that program. So that's something of interest. We've got a stand about that at USA College Day as well. I want to flag that we have opportunities which we will open up after College Day has passed to book video appointments with an advisor where you can ask questions, talk it through in more detail, and those will be available on our website. We also hold all sorts of events, both online and in person, about studying in the US. So if you're interested in digging into a particular aspect, again, we will have some more events coming up after College Day where you can come and learn more about particular aspects of the application process. Fantastic. So hopefully that's been a useful overview.